Hello, and welcome to this afternoon's BFI Film Academy Lab on working in sound design. My name is Julia Andrews Clifford, and it is my pleasure to be introducing this afternoon's session. A little bit about me for those who would like a description. I am a white middle-aged woman. I have longish, blondish hair, and I'm wearing purple glasses, and my pronouns are she or her. So today's BFI Film Academy Lab is on sound design, and these labs are masterclasses and workshops to support young filmmakers and young programmers learning from those already working in the field. And today's session is going to go that the first half hour is going to be our interview. Second half hour is over to you watching. So don't just sit back, start thinking about what your questions are. You can put them in the Q&A rather than the chat, and you can do that anytime, but come 5 o'clock, that's when the formal interview will be over and we'll be handing over to you. So there are also closed captions you can access by clicking the button at the bottom of your screen. And we hope you fully engage yourself in these questions. This is the last of our season, and we're absolutely delighted to welcome Emma Butt. So Emma, if you'd like to come to reveal yourself. Emma is a freelance dubbing mixer and sound effects editor with 14 years experience working in the industry, firstly as staff and then now as a freelancer. She began her career in Dublin, and she works across multiple genres: documentary, entertainment, drama, animation. And she is also a current member of BAFTA TV Committee. Emma, thank you so much for coming today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. And for anybody who would like a description, I am a mixed race Irish woman with long brown hair. My pronouns are she, her.
Fantastic. And so before I introduce the presenter today, I think it's really exciting that you are doing this today, because I see you're also a mentor, and you also did a report about diversity in film and TV, and in specifically diversity in post-production sound with the Sir Lenny Henry Centre for Media Diversity. So just to say, is this something that as a woman working in sound design is close to your heart? Is this a rare thing?
Yes, very much so. The report kind of showed that we are still so far behind the rest of the industry in terms of diversity, both gender and ethnic minority diversity in post-production, especially in sound. And it is frustrating still to be one of the very few, if only, women in the room when I'm working on projects, and I'm surrounded by white men. So yeah, it was a report that needed to be done, shall we say.
Wonderful. I mean, I wonder at some point we might be able to get the link to that, because also sound design itself often is the poor cousin when you're thinking about film and TV when you get into the industry. I'm also personally interested. I did an MA in film studies, and my dissertation was on sound and music. So I'm really excited to finish our year series with this subject. So enough about me. I'm going to take over if I'm not careful. So it is great pleasure that we have our young film programmer presenter, Piers Courtney. Reveal yourself.
Hello.
Hi, Piers. So a little bit about Piers. Piers is a film programmer, a designer, and a technician based in Brighton. Piers was born in Hull and got to the South Coast via University of Arts in London doing illustration, and then doing an MA in visual culture at Brighton. He's currently working at Fabrica, and we're really excited that not only is he a young film program presenter, but he's also on a paid internship at Fabrica as technician, video, shouldn't say video, first trailer reels, and doing the social media for them. On top of the fact that you are a short filmmaker, you've got 2 in production at the moment, one which is using found footage, and another that is an animated adaptation of your graphic novel. So you've got a lot of credentials there for talking to Emma. welcome. Thanks for doing today's interview.
No problem. Thank you for having me. Yeah, if anyone wants a description, I am a white male in a blue hat with a bunches of interim poster behind me. So yeah, thank you. Should we get started?
So I am going to step back. I will be joining you again at 5 o'clock, but thanks so much. Really excited to find out and dig a bit deep on what it means to be working in sound design. So over to you. Thanks, Piers.
Hi, Emma. So yeah, there was a lot of description in your job title there. I was just wondering, what is your job today? Like, what aspects of film do you take part in?
Well, my job title always confuses the hell out of people because I don't do one job role, which is kind of unusual in itself. Over in Ireland, you have to do multiple job roles because the industry is so small. So I do dialogue editing, I do sound effects editing, and then I do a process called re-recording mixing, which is taking all of the sound effects, the dialogue, the music, and something that's called ADR or ADR, as the Brits say, which is automatic dialogue replacement or replacing of actors' lines from set. And as a re-recording mixer, you take all of those elements, you balance them together, and then that's what your audience hears, whether it's a TV show or a film.
So just rearranging everything into a nice jigsaw puzzle for us lot.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like Tetris, but with blocks and waveforms, and that's it. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. So there's a lot going on there. Is there a typical week for you in sound design?
Oh God, no. Every week is different, and every hour at the moment, my schedule changes and something different happens. And it's kind of one of those industries where you just have to be adaptable, and you have to accept that you are a tiny, tiny cog in a very big wheel, and you just go with it. So you kind of have to learn to be very chilled out very quickly.
Sweet. Can I ask you that? How did you start in sound design? Like, what led you towards this career, this mad career?
Well, I actually didn't want to work in TV and film whatsoever. So when I was in school, like back in secondary school in Ireland, I was really into music, and I used to sing in choirs, and I was in a drama club, but I always knew that I was never going to be good enough to do professional singing. And I just remember one day we were recording a CD for charity, and this guy came along with a mixing desk and microphones, and I was just like, that is so cool. That is what I want to do. That's my future career. And so I started researching universities in Dublin fairly quickly, found a place called Pulse Recording Studios, and applied to them way too early, way too young, before I was even eligible to go to university. And they were like, cool your jets, come back to us in a year or two, and we'll talk to you then. And I did, and I went to that university and started studying, and they were amazing because they didn't just do music, they did radio and live sound and film as well. And so I got to learn all different aspects of sound. And then it came to the end of my course, and I was like, oh, I actually need to get a job now, and I need to go out into the real world, and I don't get to be in uni anymore. And so I started applying everywhere, not just in music studios, but in post-production facilities too. And I got a job as a runner, and that was basically it. That was when I was 19, and I've been working in the industry ever since.
So it's pretty straightforward career path then.
Yeah, I mean, it's not usually like that. It can be a struggle. I got incredibly lucky when I left university that I managed to get this job, but it's kind of a bit of luck, and it was a bit of determination. So when I went for this job interview as a runner, they kind of said to me, oh, you'll hear by Friday if you're going to get the job. And I was like, okay, cool. And then Friday rolled around and I didn't hear anything. So I actually followed it up and I emailed them. Yeah. And I was just like, oh, I just wanted to check in and see if you were still looking for someone. And by coincidence, they had actually hired someone else. They had decided that when they met me, they felt I was too timid to be a runner. Yeah, and they hired another girl instead. And that had been her first day. And she went on her lunch break and never came back. And my email arrived in their inbox just as they realized she was gone and she was never coming back in. And so they called me up straight away after they got my email and said, well, can you start on Monday?
Yeah.
And I technically still had 3 months left of my university course. And I had actually pulled a sickie from uni that day and I hadn't gone in. And so I was panicked and I was like, oh crap, I have to go and talk to my uni. But also I've told them I'm sick today and they're going to clearly discover that I am perfectly healthy. And thankfully they were really chilled and they didn't mind. But they were like, okay, cool, take this job. This is what we're training you to do. And we'll just make you part-time and you're going to have to do both for the next few months. And then, see how it goes. And that's what I did. So it was a lot of hard work, but it was definitely worth it.
And a bit of law breaking as well.
Yeah, slightly. I probably should not be encouraging people to take sickies from university.
Never ever do that.
No, definitely not.
I was just wondering, with it being kind of it seems like determination, luck, and obviously, law breaking has got you through. But was there any particular difficulties besides that you've faced during your career?
Oh yeah, big time. My gender has been an absolute nightmare of a barrier. One of the great things about my uni was that when I was leaving, they sat me down and they had a really honest chat with me, and they said, you're going to face difficulties in your career for 3 reasons. And they were like, your age is going to go against you, because I was 19 at the time, and they were totally right, because I used to go into studios, and I still do now, and people would look at me and they just assume you're too young to know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to trust you, and I'm going to be essentially aggressive towards me. And they were dismissive, and they didn't listen to my opinions, and they didn't trust that I could do my job. My uni had also said that my gender would go against me, and it did. I still face sexism in the industry consistently. I still get men speaking down to me, talking over me, interrupting me, being condescending towards me. And this isn't just men of an older age. This is young guys who I have more experience than, and they still speak down to me. And then they also said that the way I look, I will... essentially the whole Me Too movement, they were worried about sexual harassment, and thankfully I managed to mostly avoid all of that, but I did have some experiences of it, but not to the extent of what happened with the Me Too movement. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely been barriers, and there's still barriers there, which is why I partly wrote that report that Julia mentioned.
That was what I was next going to ask about. I was like, did these experiences particularly thrust you into that, to make that report, or to be a part of it?
Yeah, it pretty much did. I mean, Ireland was very different to the UK, and I got a very big shock when I came over here. So Ireland definitely was sexist. 100% my gender was used against me constantly. But the one thing I didn't really I was hired in the facility that I worked in because of my gender. Mm-hmm. So although it was sexist from the client's perspective, the facility owners did try and make their staff gender balanced, which was great. And they were trying to solve the issue. And so I did work with women in my team when I was in Dublin. And then I came to the UK and I just barely seen any women in the industry. And I was really taken aback by that. And I think I ended up working in 3 post-production facilities, and in all 3 facilities, I was the only woman in sound. Okay. And that's really, really isolating, because you just feel like you're not part of the team. You feel like an outsider. And I was speaking to colleagues who were Black or ethnic minorities, and they were obviously going into facilities and they were feeling exactly the same, because they were the only one there who was not white. Yeah. And so I kind of started to use my social media and use Twitter to speak out about this, and, try and say, hold companies to account. So if companies were holding panel discussions and there was no one there from a diverse and inclusive background, I was like, well, why not? Because there are people there who are talented enough who should be on that panel. Why aren't you doing this? And after a while, I started to get heard and I started to get traction, and that led to the Lenny Henry Centre asking me if I'd write the report.
Amazing. Well, hopefully it leads to a more open workplace in the future. like especially in film. I was wondering, may I ask, like, I don't know if it's off the top of the head, but what kind of percentage are we looking at for women and Black ethnic minorities in sound design or in film in general in the UK?
The stats actually don't exist, which is really frustrating, and it is something that as an industry we need to address. So there are reports and there's research and there's stats on literally every other department except post-production. We are kind of like this forgotten department, even though we are such an integral part of the filmmaking experience. Like, you imagine going to the cinema and watching, like, for apologies to anybody who is not into these movies, but like a Transformer movie or Mission Impossible or Top Gun, which it was like nominated for Oscars recently. Imagine seeing that without any sound and how like taken out of the film you would be. Like, sound is that added layer that brings you into the storyline. And yet we are totally dismissed and forgotten about when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and about statistics, and about skills gap training as well, and about support and talent. And it's really, really frustrating. So like I said, the stats don't exist. The only stats that I can give you are from my report, and that basically looked at the highest rated TV shows across the autumn periods, across all of the major broadcasters, so like BBC, Sky, Channel 4. And I found that out of 60 available job roles, only 6 were women and 1 person was mixed race, and everybody else identified as a white man.
I'm trying not to curse. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's not great. Like, those figures alone are really bad, and they are pretty much a reflection of the industry in the country at the moment.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I've got really deep into this now, but I'd like to try and get onto your experience and your expertise yourself in sound design. So I was just wondering, what kind of skills in particular do you need to work in sound design?
Honestly, it's more about your personality. So everybody assumes, oh, you have to be, really technical and know Pro Tools in and out and know all the software in and out. You don't. You can learn that. You absolutely can learn that. And that's what, being an assistant is for. And, starting as a runner and working in facilities, you get to train up. But what you can't learn is well, you kind of can learn, but it's people skills. This is such a people orientated industry. So it's all about, connecting with people, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, networking. Like, everybody hates networking. I hate networking. It's the most uncomfortable thing in the world. But it's one thing that I say to anybody starting out, is that you should network, because in sound, you are constantly meeting new people. You're meeting new directors, you're meeting new producers, and you essentially have to sell yourself to them. And you have to show that, you're really passionate about what you do and about what they're doing and their project, and make them want to work with you. So it's more about your people skills, and it's about being determined. Like I said, I got my job because I didn't take no answer from a company. I followed up and I emailed them. So it's about like being determined, knowing that you want to do this, and just really pushing for it. And it sounds really bad, but you can't expect everything to be handed to you. You have to just go out and try and make it for yourself and make those opportunities for yourself.
I was also thinking, especially with the people skills, how it must be, because it's such, in any film or any moving image, there's such a big team and you have to work together, and you're all, like I said, moving cogs in this thing. So you have to be able to accept when you're right and accept when you're wrong, I guess.
Exactly.
And that must come into the people skills especially, but I'm still never going to network. I don't like it.
I don't know. I think eventually you might have to, and then...
Yeah. I had a close shave at the ICO screening days the other day, but I got my Prosecco and I got out of there, so it's all right.
But you tried it. That's the main thing.
I got one person's name. That was great.
Even one person.
Yeah. So what film or project are you most proud of your career, may I ask?
Oh God. I actually struggle with this question so much. So one of my favorites was, oh God. Okay, can I give two?
Yeah, two's cool.
Okay, perfect. Right, so one of them was a project that probably no one has ever seen, but I still absolutely love it. I think everybody expects me to say Game of Thrones, and although I'm proud that I worked on that show, it is not one of my proudest credits. I worked on a movie with a director called Lenny Abramson. So he did Normal People, which was out years ago. He's done Room with Brie Larson, and he is incredible. He is like one of the nicest directors you can ever meet, has time for everybody. And he did this movie called What Richard Did. And it was about basically this group of Southside Irish rugby lads who, on a night out, murder one of their classmates. You basically get into a fight and they beat him up and they punch him so hard that he dies. So really grim story. But I did ADR on that project and it was so good. Lenny really he kind of respects everybody that works on his team, irregardless of how long you've been doing it. And I was still quite young at that time. And to be listened to and my voice heard by someone so experienced and so respected like him, it was incredible. So that's one of my favorite projects. And then the other one is probably I did a show last year called Stonehouse, and it was about kind of too close to real life at the moment, a dodgy politician. It was actually based on a true story of this politician back in, I think it was like the 80s, and he faked his own death. And he went over to Australia and he got found out and he got brought back to the UK, put on trial and ended up in prison. And it turned out that he had been having an affair with his secretary and she was all in on it. And it's just an absolutely barmy story, but it is hilarious. And I've been trying for years to get into drama and to become a dialogue supervisor on drama. And I think that was my third drama project last year. And it was just the one that I felt I was most coming into my own. And I was finally feeling comfortable with what I was doing and feeling confident. And I'm just really proud of how it turned out.
Amazing. I've got them both noted down, so I'll definitely have a look at them. They sound amazing, especially that Stonehouse one. That sounds crazy.
Oh my God, it's genuinely, I know I'm biased because I worked on it, but I would highly recommend it. It's just hilarious. And it's got Keely Hawes and Matthew McFadden in it. And even like the score in it is brilliant. It's so quirky and it's kind of like Pink Panther-esque. That's the best way to describe it.
Nice. Is there any, you're talking about what you're going into drama, is there any projects or directors or like genres that you really want to get into in the rest of your career?
Oh God. I want to do more drama for sure. That's really what I want to just start progressing on. And I still work in feature documentaries and in documentary, and I love that. I don't ever want to just stick to one genre. And that's one thing about the British industry that I found. So back in Ireland, you get to work on a bit of everything, like I said, because the industry is so small. And I found that since I've come over here, people try and pigeonhole you. Yeah. And they try and say, well, you can only do dialogue, or you can only do sound effects editing, or you can only do this, and you can only do this one genre. So you pick and then you stick with it. And I'm like, no, not doing it. So I want to continue doing a bit more variety, doing drama, doing factual, doing more animation, because I love animation.
Yeah, animation must be fun. Like so many avenues that you can go with sound.
It's incredible. It's so underappreciated, I think, from a sound perspective, because with drama or with documentary, you have something to start with, because obviously you have someone on location on the day who's recording the dialogue, who might pick up wild tracks for you. But then with animation, it is just picture. There is no sound. There is nothing to start with. And you get to create this whole world that didn't exist. There is a kids animation I did back in Dublin, and it was based on space. And so it was like this little character went to different planets on each different episode. And obviously we don't know what all of these planets sound like.
Yeah.
Like we still haven't discovered it. So we basically had free reign to make up what we thought all of these planets would sound like. So is a Saturn, that's the ring of fire. So obviously that was going to be quite like burning sound effects and like really big dramatic fire sounds and roaring and crackling. And then there was other ones where I can't remember the name of the planets now, which is really bad. But there's others where they're like, yeah, ice planets. So we got to have like loads of little tinkling and ice cracks and, you know, really play with the sound design. Yeah. You don't really get to do that with drama or documentary because you have to be realistic a lot of the time.
Yeah, the friend of mine that I'm doing the animation with is actually from Dublin as well. He does his own series called Caremore, and he said it's just limitless. Like you could just create anything, which obviously is always a bit of fun, but I find it quite terrifying, limitlessness. So is it what should filmmakers know that is different working in this sound design and different aspects of film? So we've spoken about animation and like we spoke about different areas of post-production. What makes sound design so different from the rest of those roles?
Oh God, that is a tough question.
Sorry.
That's okay. I know I said people skills are a big thing. So with dialogue or with re-recording mixing, you are very client facing. You're interacting with the clients constantly. Sound design or sound effects editing, you actually get left alone quite a lot.
Really?
Yeah, you do. Because you kind of have an initial discussion with the director, with the producers, and say, okay, you know, what do you want your drama? What do you want your animation? What do you want this documentary to sound like? And then they kind of give you notes and give you feedback. And then you go off in your merry way and you just get your head down and you concentrate. And it's a lot of experimenting. It's a lot of like control as well. There's some great threads on Twitter that kind of discuss this, but sometimes as soundies, we can try and put in too much. So we'll think we need about 20 layers of sound effects to make a great sound. Because, I mean, if you have something like a car and a car is driving by, it's not just one sound effect.
No.
You will have the car driving by, you might have the brake squeak, you might have the tire screech, you might have a rev of the engine. So there's all like multiple layers of sound effects that go on top just to make that one sound that a viewer will hear on screen. And soundies can sometimes go a bit OTT and we add too many layers. And really, we don't need that many layers. And it's about pulling yourself back a lot of the time and learning less is more.
Yeah. I remember this just came to mind, but years ago, do you ever remember the film Dinosaur, the Disney one? There was like a special effects thing on that, and I remember just them doing like the hooves and the squelching and like just a room full of people just playing basically. And it literally just came to mind when you said about the car, and it seems so interesting.
That's Foley. So so that's a Foley artist actually does that, and they do have the best crack, and they get to go and prop buy for their Foley like storage cabinets, whatever they called. And some of them will actually, do you know when you're like after coming home like from a night out or you're going out in the morning and you might see random shoes on the street.
Yeah.
Foley artists will pick up those random shoes and keep them to keep in their Foley like suitcase because every different shoe sounds different. And so every shoe on a different surface is going to sound different. So they have like racks and racks of different shoes that they can wear. When you go into a Foley like recording studio, they have these like movable floors. So you can lift up part of the floor and you'll find gravel underneath and you'll find sand. And then they'll have like pieces of carpet that they can put down. And then they'll watch what the character is doing on screen and what type of shoes they have. And then they'll crack out their found shoes from the street. It's not just found shoes, they do actually buy shoes as well. And they'll like replicate what was seen on screen.
Yeah, that's that. I'm glad to know that my revelry and my losing of shoes might be some use to someone.
You never know where they're going. Some Foley artist could be making use of them right now.
I'm gonna think that every time I watch an animation, I see someone running. I'm gonna think that could be my shoes. I think we're coming to the end, so I'll just do one last question. Is there a particular piece of advice that you've had personally or you've given out that you think would be beneficial to the people watching right now?
Yes, definitely never be afraid to ask a question and never be afraid to admit if you don't know something. One of the biggest mistakes that everybody makes, and I made this mistake starting out as well, is that you go into an environment as an assistant or as a runner or as a trainee, and you think that you have to know what someone is talking about. You have to know how to use Pro Tools. You have to know how to use certain systems. And the thing is, you don't. You're starting out. You're not meant to. You're meant to be learning it. And the worst thing you can do is say to someone, oh yeah, I know how to do that. Just leave me to it and I'll get it done. And then sit there panicking for the next half an hour being like, oh my God, I don't know what to do, and stressing yourself out. Whereas if you just say to the person who's left you, I don't know what I'm doing, can you show me? They're going to be more than happy. Like, soundies love passing on information. We love, like, you know, chatting to people and showing people this real cool nerdy trick that we all know and we all love. And I think that's across the board in every role within the film industry. Everybody loves information sharing.
Amazing. Sorry.
You're all right. Don't die on us, please.
I've held it in all the time and I was just that close to doing it.
I love that. We've got a burp. So, you know, we're going to get those sound effects going. Thank you so much. That was really fantastically interesting. I've got so many questions of my own. And so I am going to squeeze one in before we've got loads of questions from the floor as well. But you mentioned about Foley, and there's this question, and I'm going to add to it. So from an anonymous attendee, what is your favourite part of sound design and why? And I would like you to add on that. So you talked about the Foley artist, but can you also within that answer talk about how you work with the music supervisor or the composer, and at what stage that comes in on the final track? Well, that's the wrong language. You know, what order do you work in, or do you all work as a team simultaneously?
Well, that one's an interesting one. So it very much depends on the project, and it very much depends on the director. So a lot of the time, the sound department and the music department have no interaction, and we never speak, and we never hear what they're doing, and we only ever hear what they've done when it comes to the final mix. And it's actually not a great way of working, because they don't know what we've put in and we don't know what they're doing. And it means sometimes their music can clash with our sound design. So the frequencies will clash against each other. And it generally means that either our work is going to be taken out or taken right down in the mix, or their work is going to be taken out and taken right down in the mix. Or they will have like this really big instrument right as a really quiet piece of dialogue comes in. And so their music is just going to get pulled, because the dialogue is obviously key, especially if it's like a documentary or a drama. You need to hear the story. So it's really frustrating, because I think the two departments would love to work together more, but there is just never time. That's one of the downsides of this industry, is that timescales are so tight, and you know, schedules are so tight, and there's just no time for us to interact or to send stuff back and forth. You kind of get your time slot and you just go with it, and you just have to pray to God that everything's going to work in the final mix.
Amazing, thank you. And the second part of that question, which I want to follow, so to remind you then, what is your favourite part of sound design? Why? And has there been a particular project you loved working on the most, which I know you have talked about a bit already, but maybe you could connect those two bits of the question, the bit that you love working on the most?
I have to say, I love re-recording mixing. So I love when everything comes together, because a lot of clients, what happens is with a drama or with any project really, people can be working on it for years. Like, it's not just they've been working on it for a few months, they can literally be working on it for 5-6 years. And so the mix is the final part of that puzzle. That is the very last time that they get to see everything all together, all of their pre-production, their production, all of their picture editing, the visual effects, the grading, everything is all on the picture, and all of their sound comes together. And a lot of the time they can be so deflated before they get to that part because they've been working on it for so long. And then you get to show them and present them this final mix, and just the joy that you see on their faces when they get to see their project come to life, and they know that that's going to be the next stage, like audiences are going to see this. It's just wonderful. It's like the best feeling in the world, and that's my favorite part.
Amazing. Just to switch that to Piers as well. So on a small scale budget, which you own, your own, who does your sound? And at what stage do you get that feeling when you get to see it all put together, or do you do your own sound?
So my dad's actually a sound artist. So he's introduced me to contact mics. And the found footage one is an interview with my grandma. So the sound is actually an interview with my grandma about my great granddad, who was a Navy man. So it's going to be basically sound is going to be contact mics of ships and kind of the lighthouse-esque, Robert Eggers. And then the interview, which I do need a sound designer to level out because I did it on an iPhone and it's terrible. It's laughing so hard. But yeah, so, and the other one, we haven't actually got to that point yet. We're still kind of adapting the story and figuring out, because I draw, he animates, and then he also does sound. So I'll probably leave it to him because I'm not great with sound.
It's handy having a dad in the business. Okay, so we've got a lot of questions to get through, so I'm going to zip it up now and let's get to the audience. Right. Could you, Emma, explain what does a sound designer or sound FX editor do that's different from a Foley artist? And that's from David Simpkins.
Okay, so a Foley artist, actually, I'll go back a bit. So what happens is a sound effects editor will go through and they will look at like a drama or feature film. And if they get to a scene and they cannot find a sound effect for something, so say a person walking across the screen, so footsteps, cloth movement, like the noise of my jumper, like if my hand on my jumper, hand on your skin, that's all stuff the Foley artists cover. Sound effects editor doesn't do them. We don't have the time, because honestly, you just don't want to live after trying to cut in 30 footsteps and then know that you have to do it for the rest of a feckin' drama. Sorry for cursing. It's a lot of work and it's very time consuming and you get very frustrated. And Foley artists can do it so much quicker because they literally pop on their shoes, get their surfaces down, identify what they need to do, and then walk across the screen, and then they're done. They can move on. Instead of us going frame by frame. Oh, there's a footstep there. Oh, there's another one. So yes, Foley artists cover that. We try and cover as much else as we can, but sometimes there's sounds that we just can't do. It's very gruesome, but it's the best option to tell you about, so I'm sorry. So if you were doing a horror movie, and if someone like fell out of a building or got hit in the head with something, let's just try and keep it PG. So if they fell, you obviously need the impact and the sounds that would happen if a body hit the ground. I realized this was a terrible example. I'm so sorry. But we use stuff like fruit. So you use a watermelon, and Foley artists will then take a watermelon and drop it. And that's the sound that's recorded. They'll get stuff like chicken livers and like chicken breasts, and they'll use that for the squelchy sound. And like, that's not just for like horror movies. That can be for stuff like, I don't know, if you have footsteps in mud and you want to make that real squelch, like stuff like that is really good for making that sound. So it's not practical things that you would think of. It could be out of the box ideas. Like the best example is obviously coconuts for horses' hooves. I don't know if they still do that really, but you know, that's the one that everybody kind of identifies. So that's what Foley artists will do. They'll get the sounds that we can't get in libraries as sound effects editors, or that we just don't have the time to create.
Thank you. So there's a question from Henry Hagan. If you remove either dialogue or music from a film, do you think a film still resonates with its audience?
I would say no. I think you need at least one or the other. I think there was a silent movie quite a few years ago about the actor and the little dog, and I can't remember the name of it, and it was in black and white and it won loads of awards.
Piers? I don't know.
No, it was really, really well known at the time. But it was obviously a silent movie, but it still had music. And the music portrays the emotion that the dialogue couldn't do. And that's the thing. Dialogue, any type of sound, music, it's all there essentially as another character of the story and as another emotion. It's there to help you identify what you should be feeling in that scene and to make it elevated, and it just adds another depth and another layer to the story. So I think if you went to the cinema and you watched something and it was literally silent with no dialogue, no sound, no music, I think you'd be like, oh, their speakers are broken, I need to go get my money back.
Absolutely. And I mean, isn't it the original silent films, of course, weren't silent. They needed the music to cover the sound of the projector. Exactly. And so it's a kind of misnomer. But I wanted to, like, one of the recommendations you did for our newsletter was The Dark Knight. And you mentioned a scene where there's silence.
Yeah.
So, like, when you actually tell us, a little bit the role silence plays as well. Like actual silence.
Yeah, I mean, silence is so underrated as a tool in sound design. So The Dark Knight Rises, there's an incredible scene in that movie where I think it's Batman is chasing the Joker through the streets of Gotham, and the Joker is in this absolutely massive truck, and the truck flips over. But if you watch that scene again, you'll see that there is a moment where all of the sound just cuts out and it's dead and it's silent. And then next of all, the truck flips over, and the impact is even more dramatic because you've had that moment, you've had that breath of there's nothing going on, what's going to happen? So it adds to the tension, and then it makes more of an impact when the sound does come back in. It feels louder, it feels more in your face. Whereas if it had just been wall-to-wall sound up until that moment, I don't think that would have hit as hard as it did. And that's the thing, if you use silence in the right ways, it can make your story so much more dramatic.
Yeah, it's about dynamics, I suppose, isn't it? I seem to remember Walter Murch, back in the day, wrote about if you've got a lot going on the screen, don't have loads going on the soundtrack, and vice versa. But yeah, because it's kind of like it's all just too much. Back to what you're saying, less is more sometimes, but it's got to, the sound and the image have to do a dance. And if it's all like that all the time, it's lost.
Yeah, it's sensory overload. And I think it's one of the things that a lot of clients actually, a lot of execs and a lot of directors, they make the mistake of being like, well, if we don't spoon feed everything to the audience, they're not going to get it. And actually, that's not the case. I think sometimes you need to let stuff breathe. I mean, one of the things I worked on was Alan Bennett's Talking Heads. And that series is amazing. There's an episode with Monica Dolan, and it's called The Shrine. And they just do this incredible thing where there's a scene at the end, and she says her little dialogue, and then there's no sound, there's no more dialogue, and the camera just slowly pans in on her, and you take a moment, and she's basically silently crying and breaking down about what's happened to her in the story, which I'm not going to say because in case anybody wants to watch it. And it's brilliant, and it adds to that emotion because it makes you as a viewer focus on what's happening on screen, on her face and what she's doing. And it kills me every time I watch that scene. Absolutely kills me. And it just shows how well, if you give space and don't try and spoon feed people, it will still have the same impact. It will probably have more impact actually.
Yeah, thank you. One of the questions, which isn't really a question, just said the artist, and I suppose it's
that's it. That was the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Ah, really?
Yeah, that was the film.
Great. Okay. But I was taking it also on the it's an artistry as much. It's not often it's considered techie, but it's also the artistry. So
Yeah.
anyway, there's a question from Kate McCourt, which I think connects a little bit, you know, is there room in the industry for people who would ideally like to work both on film sets and in post-production?
So I will say it is very difficult to do both. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very difficult. And the only reason I would say that is because it's two very different skill sets. So one, post-production is it is incredibly creative, but there is also a technical aspect because you do have to know how to use the software and you do have to know how to use the computers and be adaptable to the different rooms. We've also got technical specs that we have to adhere to. So TV shows have to be a certain loudness, and I won't get into the details of it because it's very, very boring, but it's basically to stop people complaining about mumbling on screen, which obviously is failed epically in doing because people still say they can't understand dialogue on TV shows. But that's why our loudness specs are there. So post-production, we have that aspect of it as well as the creative. In location sound, you are just dealing with like the mics and mic positionings, and it's also about like identifying possible noise sources that might be on set on the day that you might need to speak to the director or speak to like the person looking after a generator to ask them to move. Again, people skills, like I said earlier on. And it's less technical. There's less technical software that you need to know. So that's the only downside. Like I said, it's not impossible, but it is very difficult and there's very few who do it.
Thank you. And what are the titles, job titles in location sound? Could you quickly?
Yeah, so there's a production sound mixer who is essentially the person in charge. Then there would be a boom op, which self-explanatory, boom. And then there'd be a first assistant sound or a second assistant sound, and they'd be the ones who would like mic up everybody, look after cables, essentially the runner on set for sound.
Brilliant, thank you. So many jobs in sound, but we don't always think of them. So we've got a question from David Simpkins. Hi Emma, thank you so much for talking to us. You mentioned you'd been trying for years to get into drama. Would you say that some genres are harder to get into than others? Then, is it difficult to change genre? And do directors or producers prefer you to sell yourself as working in a specific genre to begin with?
So I'll try not get ranty about this.
Good.
Essentially, this is an issue with the British industry in that they do try and pigeonhole you, and it is kind of considered that. So I've been doing dialogue for years, but I've not been doing it in drama, and that's what went against me to try and move into drama. I was told time and time again that I didn't have the right type of credit in order to be given a drama opportunity. But the problem is, how can you get the right type of credit if someone doesn't take a chance on you and give you an opportunity? So it's a chicken and egg situation, and it's a situation that the industry needs to address and stop doing. Because when it comes to jobs like sound, as long as you have the technical ability, you are pushing the same buttons, you are doing the exact same job, it's just a different format. That's it. It might be a different length. There's no other difference. That's it. But because you don't tick this little box of having the right type of credit, they don't want to let you progress. And it is a very narrow-minded way of looking at things, especially when we're in the midst of a skill shortage. So it is difficult and people try and make it difficult. There are others now in senior positions that are trying to stop that and say, well, if you have the experience in factual or a documentary, then absolutely, if you're doing dialogue and that, you can do dialogue and drama, you're going to be grand. And that's how I got my opportunity, and that's how I've managed to get into drama, because someone said, no, you know what you're doing, you're going to be grand, you know, here's the job. So yeah, it's frustrating and it is difficult.
It's like specialization gone mad. I was going to bring Piers in, you know, so at your level, where, you know, you did illustration, you got animation, but you're also doing found footage. Do you think as a young filmmaker, you have to kind of pigeonhole yourself to get work? Or, you know?
I don't know. With the stuff that I make, it usually doesn't, I haven't picked found footage because I picked it because it worked with what I was doing. And the same with the animation was that it's just me and this friend have wanted to do a project together for a while, and I made this graphic novel. We thought it'd work well together with our styles. So I'm not sure, maybe if I continue doing them in the future, if I'm particularly stuck on found footage, or I'm particularly stuck with a certain aspect, then yeah, but at the minute I've no, I don't have enough in me to be pigeonholed.
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, that's it. It's like an art thing where if you're good at all styles, then no one thinks you're right. So it's a funny thing about versatility, I guess. And maybe there's prejudice there. But anyway, I should stop talking because there's loads of questions. Okay, these are now all more about getting a job. So anonymous attendee, what sort of money could you make on projects?
So I will say BEC2, which is the union for the industry, they have a rate card. So anytime anybody brings up the money question, I always say, have a look at the BEC2 rate card, and that's what everybody should be starting on. There's set up like assistant rates, trainee rates, all the way up to more senior levels. And that's what all of us in the sound industry in the UK are trying to aim for. So have a look at that.
Amazing, really useful. George Birkin says, what is the most common mistake you see people make when trying to get into the industry?
To be very blunt, arrogance. It's people thinking that because they've done a university course or because they've done some type of course that they know everything. And like I said earlier on, courses and university courses give you an incredible foundation. They're like not to be sniffed at. They give you the basics and they give you confidence, but they don't teach you everything. And working in like the working environment, working with clients, working with deadlines, it's very, very different. And it is a lot more pressurized, and it is, it's tough. It is tough, especially when you're starting out. And I think the worst thing that I see people do is coming into the industry being like, well, I've done this course. I spent the last 3 years in uni. I know what I'm doing. Just like, let me get on with it. And it's like, you don't. And you need to know how to interact with clients in a certain way. And you are going to get clients that are very difficult and very precious. And you need to know how to approach that situation and calm it down and build that trust, because that's essentially what it comes down to as well. There has to be trust there between you and your client. And I think that just takes years of experience. Unfortunately, there's no quick way around it.
Yeah, and I mean, that relates to a question from T. Jackson. If I worked in the sound design field, would I have to be freelance to be successful? They've also asked about the salary, but I'll switch that because we've covered that.
No, you don't have to be. You can absolutely work in a facility. I chose to be freelance, mainly because it was very difficult to be in a facility, but also do my diversity and inclusion work. Because sometimes my ideals and my ethics go against what the company values might be, and they might disagree with me being so outspoken. So in order for me to do my work and be able to do it successfully, I need to be independent, because then I'm not going to get in trouble with my boss, the next morning. But absolutely, there's so many successful people that are in facilities that are getting nominated for Oscars and incredible awards, that are like, just working constantly. So no, absolutely, whatever suits you best is going to be absolutely grand.
I mean, do you think that the fact that you worked in a facility first and then you went freelance, because it's quite hard to go freelance first in terms of where are your contacts? Exactly. It's a lot harder to get them when you're freelance. In the old days, you went freelance after you'd already gathered all the contacts and you'd worked for a company.
Yeah,
anyway.
No, well, you're dead right. Like when I first came to the UK, I could not have gone freelance straight away. I had to work in those facilities because no one over here knew who I was. And so I needed to get my name out there, and I needed to get my reputation out there and make sure that people knew that I did know what I was doing and who I was, and that they could trust me to take on their projects. And it was only after 3 years of networking my backside off and meeting as many people as I could and getting them to know me and using social media, using LinkedIn, using Twitter. That's when I was confident enough to go freelance. So yeah, you're dead right.
Great. So there's you've answered it. One question: how easy it to find work in the industry? Is networking the only way? Yes, I think. Even though Piers, you're going to have to do it. I think another way of thinking about networking is just listening to people rather than presenting yourself. Go in curious. It changes the dynamic. So there's also, it relates, anonymous attendee, how does getting jobs work? Do you reach out to people or do they reach out to you?
Both. So you do have to do both. Because I kind of got to know people while I was in a facility, and they knew that I was going freelance, they now reach out to me. But in terms of getting new work, I reach out to people. I try and network, even though I hate it. And I try and find like people that I really like the projects that they've done in the past. And honestly, sending an email, like reaching out to a director that you really admire, that you love their work, and just saying, you know, I work in sound, just wanted to say hello, loved your project, explain why I've loved their project, and say, you know, if you're ever looking for someone in sound, please do reach out. You'd be surprised how many times that works.
Brilliant, absolutely. So there's also a quick question, a very sort of practical one from Peter Adams. Who or what are the main sound facilities we could try approaching?
Oh God.
Is there a list somewhere, or
you to be honest, I obviously, when I was moving over here, I had to do exactly that. I had to find facilities, Google. Yeah. This is the thing. Everybody assumes that, like I said, you can't expect anything to be handed to you. You got to work your backside off for it. And Google is your friend. And all I did was type in post-production facilities London, because obviously that's where I wanted to live. But do the same for Manchester, Glasgow, wherever you are. Manchester especially, massive post-production scene up there. And I would go onto their contacts page and I would try and find the facilities manager or their client relations manager or the head of sound. If it was going in as a runner position, I would always say client facilities manager is the person that you need, because head of sound, even if you want to get into sound, they are not the person who's hiring runner positions or trainee positions. The facilities manager is. And so that's what you look for. If I couldn't find their contact details on Google, I would then go onto LinkedIn and I would try and find them that way. And I would try and send them a message that way. So I literally tried to find every single avenue I could to contact these people and try and get in. So that's what I'd say. Google, search, do your research. And it does take a long time, and it is like having a job trying to search them out, but it is worth it in the end.
Yeah, a bit of detective work. And obviously you talked about at the beginning, that kind of determination. You've got to dig around. Absolutely. Sending emails into the ether ain't going to do it. You need a named person.
Yeah.
We've got only a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to bundle a few questions together. So from Julia Salmon, I'm a mature student and female. I previously worked in a corporate business environment. I'm wondering if the age thing might work for or against me, allowing for the issue of sexism as well. In some ways, being older means that I'm not especially fazed by male chauvinism, but do you find that proving competence eventually overcomes the sexism, or to what degree do you find this an ongoing battle? And I guess there's another one that said, how do you find confidence in an industry that often doesn't respect you?
Oh God, right, finish on the tough ones. Thanks for that.
Sorry.
Bloody hell. The age thing, I personally, I don't think it's an issue. I think if you're younger, it is an issue because people look at you and expect you not to have experience. I think actually if you're going in as someone older, they're going to trust you more. And that's just a fact. They're going to just look at you and be like, this is a safe pair of hands, I don't have to worry. So personally, I wouldn't find age a factor whatsoever. And you will find that a lot of people working in the film industry did a different career first and then moved into film. I think one of the guys that I worked with in Dublin, he had been a marine biologist and then he moved into sound. So like totally random, different career. So do not let that stop you. Obviously being a woman, it is getting better. That is improving. There's still a long way to go, but it's definitely getting there. And I've totally forgotten the other part of that question.
Don't worry. I think it was more if there's like, how do you keep your confidence when there's a sense, you know, we've talked about the, you know, ageism and sexism. I mean, ageism in a kind of reverse ageism, I guess you experienced.
How do I keep my confidence? It is very tough. You have to have boundaries in place to protect yourself, and you have to have a life outside of this industry. So I randomly do aerial acrobatics in my spare time, which I'm actually going to tonight after this talk. And that's my little time away from this industry, that I'm surrounded by nice, lovely, inclusive people that I know are not judgmental. They're just there to do something fun of their evening, and I'm there to do that too. And if I'm after having an absolutely horrific day, I try and leave it behind. If someone's been horrible to me, I try and leave behind and go to my safe space. And I think you have to have that separation in this industry, because there are going to be days where, not because they're awful and not because they're horrible, but people get frustrated, and they can be in very stressful situations, and they don't project that in the nicest possible way. And so you got to put barriers up to protect yourself and keep your confidence that it's not you, it's they're going through stuff and you can't take it on.
Well, it's a great answer to finish on. You know, in this world of 24/7 work, and everyone has to work more for less money, keeping some boundaries for your well-being is like absolutely. But we've run out of time. That's like, I think was probably one of the busiest Q&As that we've ever had. So I think we've really hit on a thing that's really exciting to have spoken about sound design and heard such an inspirational but realistic approach to how you might get into it. Thank you so much. I don't know, Piers, if you want to say anything, I'll let you get the last bit in.
I'll just
got a
say
bit over time, but
I'll say thank you to Emma. It's all good. It's all good.
So thanks so much for coming. We'll hopefully have this recording online, if you two are okay with that, so that we can watch it again, because it was so rich with information. Thank you both so much, and have a good evening, and enjoy your safe space time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.